Okay, good morning. Can you guys hear me?
Still sharing. Yeah, I can see it now.
Okay. Thank you. All right, my topic today is risk response planning, reducing threats to project objectives. So, for starters, if you have a business, all right, or you work in someone else's business, you work for someone, you would agree with me that there are a lot of risks that are present in that particular business, either trying to threaten the progress of that business or presenting themselves as opportunities, because risks can be categorized in two, um, let me use the word branches, although it's not perfect, but you have positive risks, which are threats, and you have negative risks. Sorry, we have positive risks, which are opportunities, and we have negative risks, which are threats. So in order to, in order not to be affected, or in order to maximize a particular opportunity or reduce the effect of the threat as they come, you have to put in place strategies that would help you respond to those risks effectively as they come. So that's where risk response planning come into play. All right. So this is my table of contents. I'll first of all introduce what this is, and then we'll go into what risk response planning is, and then inputs to risk response planning, the risk response strategies, outputs to risk response planning. Then we'll talk about the risk response matrix, and then we'll use Income Dev Center as a case study. And then I'll conclude and take questions. So let's get into it. First of all, risks are, and a risk is anything that has a potential to cause harm. That is the negative risk. Or it could be an opportunity that can be maximized, to make profits, which is the positive risks, which is opportunities. So having a good and concise risk response plan would let you know how to handle said risks as they come, and ultimately enable you save costs that would have been otherwise spent unnecessarily if proper planning was not put in place. So if you don't put appropriate plans in place, if you don't put in strategies that would enable you to curtail these threats or maximize particular profits, you might either be affected by the negative risks, or you might miss out on a brilliant opportunity to improve on your business. So a good risk response plan will help you enhance opportunity risks as well. Okay, so what is risk response planning? In risk management, there are a lot of processes that are put in place to help you tackle risks or maintain them. So risk response planning is one of those processes. So it involves the process of developing options and determining actions to enhance opportunities and reduce threats to the project's objectives. It follows the qualitative risk analysis and quantitative risk analysis processes. So those two terms, if you do not understand them, maybe you can read up on them later, but this particular topic does not treat those ones. So it includes the identification and assignment of one or more persons. Yes, because whenever you're trying to manage a risk, you have to appoint a person. You have to appoint, let's say, a manager who will be responsible for taking care of those risks and will be able to report back to management or whosoever is in charge. So these persons are called the risk response owners to take responsibility for each agreed to and funded risk response. So risk response planning addresses risks by their priority, or more or less hierarchy, because there might be some impending risks that might pose a bigger threat than others. So risk response planning addresses them by their priority, inserting resources and activities into the budget, schedule, and project management plan as needed. So you have to make plans for all these things, whatever strategy you're using. So there are inputs to risk response planning. So these include the risk management plan. We have a list of prioritized risks. We have the risk ranking for the project. You have the probabilistic analysis of the project, the probability of achieving the costs and time objectives, and you have a list of potential responses. You have risk thresholds, risk owners, and common risk causes. So let's go to risk response strategies. So there are a lot of strategies that are available, like a number of them that you can employ, depending on the type of risk you're trying to manage, the type of risk you're trying to take care of. So the strategy is most likely to be effective. The strategy that is most likely to be effective should be selected for each risk. You don't select a particular strategy that will not work for a particular risk. You can actually try, if you're not too sure, you can try out a particular strategy. If that one does not work, you can try out another type. You just keep trying, but you have to make sure that in these trial sessions, you are not wasting a lot of money, you're not wasting a lot of resources. So you have to be very careful when you're selecting the type of strategy you'd like to use to take care of any particular risk. All right. So when you select the most likely effective strategy, then specific actions should be developed to implement that particular strategy. Primary and backup strategies will be selected. So some of these strategies include, you have avoidance. All right, this is more or less trying to, if you already have a project plan, and let's say, for instance, that particular plan is kind of new. So you're not so sure of the kind of risks that are abound in that particular plan that might affect that particular plan. Sorry, let me just mention, this is the beginning of the strategies for negative risks, that is threats. These strategies that I'm mentioning now, they are the strategies for handling negative risks, which are threats. So if in your plan, you do not have a clear idea of what risks might intend to affect that particular plan, and you're not so sure of the solutions, maybe the solutions are not even, they've not been developed yet, like they've not been really worked on, you can change that particular plan to avoid that risk at all. You can change your plan to something familiar, something that you are more conversant with, to eliminate that particular risk from affecting that project. So risk avoidance is changing the project plan to eliminate the risk or condition, or to protect the project objectives from its impact. Although the project team can never eliminate all risk events, some specific risks may be avoided. Some risk events that arise early in the project can be dealt with by clarifying requirements, obtaining information, improving communication, or acquiring expertise, reducing scope to avoid high-risk activities, adding resources or time, adopting a familiar approach instead of an innovative one. Like I said earlier, if you are not too sure of a particular plan that you want to adopt for a project, you can switch to something that is more familiar to save yourself stress, to save yourself extra costs. Because if you are not so sure and you don't have mapped out clear strategies to tackle any risk that you're not even sure of, you would end up spending a lot of money. So it's better you adopt a familiar approach instead of an innovative one, or avoiding an unfamiliar subcontractor. So these two are examples of avoidance. The next strategy you have there is transference. So this is more like insurance. When you have a car and you pay insurance for that particular car, anything that happens to that car, say an accident or whatever, that insurance company takes care of that damage. So you are just transferring responsibility to a third party. That is what transference is. You're not taking responsibility of taking care of that thing, but mind you, you are paying that particular third party for that service because it's a service you're renting to you. So you pay that third party periodically to handle that, to manage that risk, to take responsibility. Mind you, are not eliminating that risk. You don't pay insurance money to an insurance company and expect that your car you won't get involved in an accident, or God forbid, I'm not saying anybody will get into an accident. But let's just say that I'm just saying it doesn't eliminate that possibility completely. You are just transferring responsibility to a third party to take care of that event should it happen. That is what transference is all about. So risk transfer is seeking to shift the consequence of a risk to a third party together with ownership of the response. Transferring the risk simply gives another party responsibility for its management. It does not eliminate it. It does not take away that. It does not take away the possibility of that risk occurring. You're just shifting responsibility. So transferring liability for risk is most effective in dealing with financial risk exposure. Risk transfer nearly always involves payment of a risk premium to the party taking on the risk. Like I said earlier, you're paying that third party, you're paying the insurance company or whosoever it is that is taking care of that risk for you. You're paying them. It's not a free service. You have to pay them to take on that responsibility. So these include insurance, performance bonds, warranties, and guarantees. So the next one we have there is mitigation. This is more like reducing the effects of a particular risk should it occur. Like you can see in the picture, there's someone is falling and then use a pillow to break the fall. If that pillow was not there, that person would probably land and break his back. So with the pillow there, the person will just have a soft landing. So mitigation seeks to reduce the probability and or consequences of an adverse risk event to an acceptable threshold. So while you're employing this strategy, you have to make sure that you are reducing it to something that you can accept, something your company can accept, something that you can bear. All right. So taking early action to reduce the probability of a risk occurring or its impact on the project is more effective than trying to repair the consequences after it has occurred. So let's use this picture as an example. Had it been that pillow was not there, that person would probably land and break his back. And then what will you do afterwards? You take the person to the hospital, try to maybe go for an X-ray, see what is broken or whatever, and try to fix that problem. And you know that it will be more costly doing all these things when you could have just put something under there to break that person's fall. But the person will just have a minor pain at the back or something. That would be all. So taking early action to reduce the probability of the risk occurring is better than trying to fix whatever damages that have occurred after that risk has already happened to you or to your business. So mitigation costs should be appropriate given the likely probability of the risk and its consequences. Now the next one there is acceptance. So acceptance is more like a last resort. When you've tried to employ those other strategies that I mentioned from avoidance, transference, mitigation, and they don't seem to be working. Or maybe you've not tried them out, you just made a blueprint of applying some of those strategies and you just see that they won't work. This is your last resort, you have to accept. All right, just accept it and bear the cost of whatever effects it will have on you or on your business. So this technique indicates that the project team has decided not to change the project plan, but to deal with a risk or is unable to identify any other suitable response strategy. So there are two types of acceptance. It can either be active or passive acceptance. So in active acceptance, you might make contingency plans, you might make backup plans to execute should a particular risk occur. And in the passive acceptance, you're not taking any action at all. You're just leaving the project teams to deal with the risks as they occur. You're just winging it. All right, so for positive risks, which are opportunities, there are strategies as well, kind of like opposites of the negative risk strategies, risk response strategies. So you have exploit, which is to add work or change the project to make sure that that opportunity occurs, or to make sure that that you maximize that opportunity. The next one there is enhance, which is increase the probability and positive impacts of risk events or opportunities. Then the third one there is share, allocate ownership of opportunity to a third party, which is an example of this, I think, is partnership. You partner with somebody to take on a particular venture and then you share the benefits of that opportunity. Now we have outputs to risk response planning. These are things that come out of risk response planning. You have residual risks, which are those that remain. Because sometimes when you take care of these risks or when you apply some strategies, there are still some that are left there that couldn't be completely contained. So they include minor risks that have been accepted and addressed. For example, by adding contingency amounts to the cost or time allowable. You have secondary risks, which are risks that come about as a result of implementing a particular risk response. Maybe you did not foresee them, or maybe you might have foreseen them and then put in a secondary plan in place to take care of those secondary risks. So there are risks that arise as a direct result of implementing a risk response and are termed secondary risks. These should be identified and responses planned. Like I said, some of the time, or most of the time, you can't foresee these secondary risks. So when you actually see them, when they're about to occur, you should put in plans to make sure that they are addressed so that they don't have any effects on you, or maybe the effects on you would be mitigated to an acceptable degree. So next, you have the contractual agreements. So contractual agreements may be entered into to specify each party's responsibility for specific risks should they occur, and for insurance, services, and other items as appropriate to avoid or mitigate threats. You have the inputs to other processes. You have inputs to a revised project plan. These are all outputs of the risk response strategy. Now, coming to the risk response matrix. The risk response matrix is like the term there is a matrix. So there are some things involved in the risk response matrix. You have the risk owner, you have a particular risk, you have the response strategy, and some other things. Just it's like a plan. You know, when you've identified a particular risk and you know the strategy that you want to adopt to address that particular risk, and then you assign a risk owner or a risk manager, someone who is responsible for taking care of that risk. You put this all in the matrix so that the plan will be clear. So you don't have any confusion when you're trying to implement the plan or implement your strategy. So a risk response matrix is designed and used to ensure that a company, project, or person is properly prepared to manage and respond to these risks in an effective manner. The risk response matrix is less known, but often more important, as it serves as a framework for planning for and actioning risk. So the risks which the risk response matrix are based on are often pulled through a risk assessment matrix first, and then placed inside of the risk response matrix. And the risk response matrix can even be attached to a risk assessment matrix or directly following it. I don't know if you've ever taken a course in HSC, you would have come across the term risk assessment matrix. It's a tool used in assessing risks, knowing the kind of risk it is that you're dealing with, and the degree to which it will affect your business or not. So this risk response matrix is sometimes pulled from that particular document. So, like I said, there are some things contained in the risk response matrix. You have the risk events, which is the events that is planned for or responded to. That's the risk event. Then you have the planned response. That's the particular strategy you intend to employ to address that risk, whether it's corrective or mitigation or you're avoiding or whatever. And then you have a contingency plan so that the outcomes of the incident or risk events is managed. You have the trigger, something that initiates that contingency plan, something that makes you to have that contingency plan. And then you have also in the risk response matrix, the risk owner, that's who is responsible for managing this specific risk and the risk response actions. So these components link straight back to the goal of the risk response matrix, which is to simply outline all the necessary components of planning for all your known risks. Like I said earlier, the risk response matrix just gives you a clear view of what you want to do, what you're about to do, and how you intend to do it. That's the objective or goal of the risk response matrix. So you see an example of a risk response matrix in the next slide. I hope this image is clear. Can you guys hear me? Hello, am I audible?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, so this is an example of the risk response matrix. You have in different columns, you have the risk events, You have the response, the contingency plan, the trigger, and then the person that is responsible for managing that particular risk. So under risk events, one of the examples here is system freezing. So the response to that particular risk event is to mitigate, test the prototype, and then contingency plan is to restore the operating system. So the trigger is still frozen after 1 hour, and then you have Luis or whoever, Samuel, Matthew, whoever you want to put in charge of that particular risk. And the person that you're putting in charge of a risk, that's the risk owner, should have an idea of what that risk is or whatever the cost is. Like it should be in that person's knowledge track. Let me use that phrase. The person should have a good idea of what you are dealing with, so that he would, in shorter words, just pick the best person possible to handle a particular risk. Otherwise, you still have issues, or the risk will not be addressed properly. So Become Dev Center as a case study. Let's just bring this discussion home. So imagine that there hasn't been any recorded improvements in the performance of staff or interns, and this could be a potential trigger of a risk event, which could be under training. If someone in the company is not performing optimally or as the person should be, it could mean that the person is undertrained. What do you do in this situation? Table the issue to management or to pro services, and that person would be given the necessary training needed. Otherwise, the person will not be contributing his or her quota to the company, and that would not help the company. All right. So another example would be to maximize on an opportunity that could lead to potential growth of the company, like partnerships or pitching for a project that boosts the finances and the name of the company. So when you are able to identify risks in your business or in your company, and you have clear plans to tackle those risks, you needn't worry about being affected by adverse effects of that particular risk. Or maybe when you put in place strategies to make sure that a particular opportunity comes into your company, you know that it means growth and recognition for your company as well. So in conclusion, risk response planning is important and its benefits cannot be overemphasized. I believe from the presentation, you will agree with me that this is true. So it helps address risks by their priority, inserting resources and activities into the budget, schedule, and project management plan as needed. It includes the identification and assignment of one or more persons, the risk response owner, to take responsibility for each agreed to and funded risk response. So a risk response owner, it might not be just one person, it can be a particular team. Maybe you can set up a team to manage a particular risk, depending on the magnitude of that risk. If it is a big risk and you feel that it will be too much for one person to handle, you can assign a team of people who are conversant with what the risk is all about, so that it can be managed effectively. So this way, it's just all about accountability, right? It's a way of making someone accountability for taking care of that risk. Because if no one is assigned to that risk and it's not handled, no one will be to blame. Like, you won't be able to point out someone, okay, this is the person I appointed to take care of this risk and it's not been taking care of what is going on. You won't be able to hold anybody accountable. So to avoid, or if you overlook this particular subject matter, it will not do you any good. All right, so I've come to the end of my presentation. I don't know if you guys have any questions for me. Are there any questions? Hello, am I still on?
Yeah, you're home. We have questions for Mr. Michael. Any question for him? Or is everyone cold?
Abi, was it very clear? Was the presentation very clear? Because that could be the reason why there are no questions.
You want to assume everybody know what you are presenting, Abi?
Yeah?
You want to assume everybody understand what you are presenting?
Yeah, that could be the reason there are no questions. I'm just saying anyways.
Okay. You can ask your own question. Of course, you should have objective question to ask.
Okay. Actually, I didn't plan to ask any question, but let me just come up with something.
Want to do evaluation?
Evaluation.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Let me just throw this question now. So, amongst all the risk response strategies that I mentioned for responding to negative risks, which are threats, which one do you think is best? I'm throwing this question to the house.
The house is full of everybody.
Anybody can answer.
Okay.
So who wants to answer the question? Abi, should I pick?
We have Matthew. Matthew is raising up his hand.
Okay, Matthew, go ahead.
In my opinion, I think avoidance is the best. It's better you avoid something than to try to solve it.
Okay, thank you, Matthew. Does any other person have a different opinion? Any different opinion from anybody?
Abubakar.
Abubakar, you want to say something?
Samuel. Hello?
Yeah,
Yes, I can
he's
hear you.
asking you a question.
Hello, can anybody hear me?
Yeah, please
Yes,
Hello?
we can hear you.
Oh my gosh. Hello?
We can hear you. You are not hearing us.
Okay, I can hear you. It's raining here. I can't hear clearly. So what was your question?
The question is, amongst all the risk response strategies for managing negative risks, which are threats, which one do you think is the best approach?
Okay. If you ask me, I would say avoid strategy.
Avoidance, that's what you're saying. Okay.
Did you hear me?
Yes, I heard you. So why do you think is avoidance?
Yeah, because you have to face the eliminate the threats. So to avoid the anything that could affect you. So eliminating the threat there is kind of important. Am I
Okay.
getting the point? Or I'm missing something?
No, you have a point. You have a point. Your point is valid. Your point is quite valid.
She was attentive, I guess.
So
Yeah, I
any
think Benga Aruna.
is Aruna with us? Does he want to say something?
Should say something. You see? I guess it's just on, not attentive. Ogbeide, yeah. Ogbeide. Ogbeide. God's time. Olivia, I guess you have something to say about the response.
Hello, sorry, I couldn't hear what you were saying.
All right. Please, can you repeat yourself, Michael?
Okay, the question is, amongst all the risk response strategies for managing negative risks, which are threats, which one do you think is the best approach? Did you get that now?
Oh, yeah, I heard the question, but I actually don't have an idea.
You see?
Okay, but do you know the risk response strategies for managing negative risks?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Any other person?
Ekolapo. Ekolapo.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning. Please attend to the question.
I don't know the answer to the question.
What was the question?
I didn't get that very well, but I did not know the answer to the question.
You didn't
I'm
even
just
get the
joining because
question.
of I'm just
You've been here
joining.
for a while. Come on,
So
you've been here for a while.
Okay, Paul, should I repeat the question? Since you say you
okay,
didn't get
yeah,
it very
repeat
well.
the question.
Okay, the question is this. Of all the risk response strategies for managing negative risks, which are threats, which one do you think is the best approach?
For managing what?
Negative risks, for responding to negative risks, which are threats, which one do you think is the best approach?
I don't know about that. I have no idea.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Ismail Shoaib. Ismail Shoaib. Ismail Shoaib. Absent. Okay. Adebayo is not here. All right. Do you have any other question, Michael?
Okay. Let me. In the mitigation strategy, or what is the mitigation strategy all about? What is the mitigation strategy all about?
Damilare. Can you repeat yourself?
Okay, I'm asking, what is the mitigation strategy all about? What does it entail?
Okay. Can I answer the question, Michael?
Yes, go ahead.
Cool. All right. From my understanding, I think mitigation strategy is when you try as much as possible to reduce the effects of the risk, or reduce the chances of a risk happening.
Thank you very much. That is correct. Okay, just to make things clear, I want to answer the first question that I asked. The people that spoke that gave me responses, you had a point. But in risk response, you respond to a particular risk with a strategy that suits it. If it is a risk that cannot be avoided, there's no way you can avoid it. You either mitigate or you transfer. You understand? Like I mentioned earlier, I made an example using a car. You have a car, you drive a car, and there is no 100% probability that that car will not be involved in even if it is the tiniest accident. Maybe let's say you're on the road and someone bashes you from behind, the bumper or your fender. You know, let's say you're driving in Lagos and you know how hectic and crazy Lagos can be in traffic. So you can't guarantee 100% that you can avoid a situation like that. So there is no particular strategy that is best for handling any risk at all. You work with what suits a particular risk. You have to analyze that risk and see what strategy works best for it. All right. So I understand and I acknowledge you guys saying that avoidance is the best because, yeah, it might sound and look like the best, but honestly, you have to work with what works best for a particular risk. So
I have a question, sir.
you have a question?
Yeah. This
Okay, go
risk
ahead.
you're talking about.
Okay.
The risk I always know is risk after risking something you get profit, risking something to get a reward.
Sorry, I can't hear you well.
Risking something, is it the same thing as risking something to get a reward?
Risking
this
something
risk you're talking about.
That's for your
No.
Who is that? Who is responding?
Sorry, who was that? Someone was trying to answer the question, I think.
I think Adenka.
Yes, it's Adinka. The risk it was talking about is not taking a chance. It's about avoiding a potential hazard or something in that way.
Okay, avoiding something
A
bad.
potential, yes, and unfavorable an event that
Incident.
will bring an unfavorable outcome. That's the risk is talking about.
Okay.
So
Now,
not
in one
risk
word.
to take an opportunity.
Okay, it's not a risk of taking an opportunity.
Yes,
It's a
the
risk
risk
of,
that yes, so that you
okay,
prevent of an action that will likely bring an unfavorable outcome. That's the risk he's talking about.
okay, cool.
Okay, so does that answer your question, Samuel?
Yeah, it does. It does.
All right. Thank you.
All right.
So,
All right.
any other question? Are we done?
I was expecting someone here this morning. But anyways, I think the main Adegbenga Una, are you on now?
Samuel,
Adegbenga, not Mubarak.
I want to say something different.
Okay, cool.
Please, in regards to the weekly drill, right? Today is only today. I hope you are aware that we are having class by 10.
That's exceptional, I guess.
We are exceptional, right?
Yeah.
Because I don't want to be very.
All right, everyone. Thank you for attending this morning's session. It's a cold day. I wish and I hope we all hit ourselves up with our task delivery today. Have a great day, everyone. I wish you all the
Mr.
best.
Samuel,
Yes.
Mr.
Mr.
Samuel,
Please,
Okay.
this can we have a link to the presentations like this so that you can even after the presentation we can go through the slides and see.
Okay. That's based on request.
Okay.
You note down the presenter. Talk to the presenter. He or she will
You
share
send
the slide.
okay.
Yeah.
All
Mr.
right.
Samuel,
Yes, Africa.
sorry, when will you be available for that revision of slides?
I'm sorry. Okay, let's do it today by 4.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
All right. Have a good day, everyone.
Yeah, thank you.
Is that all? Okay. Yeah, cool.